Hey guys, tonight we slip into the frostbitten world of the Vikings, where you're standing on a wind-whipped fjord, your breath clouding in the air as the first snowflakes of a brutal Norse winter swirl around you. The sky is a heavy grey, like a wool blanket slung over the mountains, and the cold bites at your fingertips, promising months of relentless chill. You're about to learn how the Vikings survived the coldest nights of the years. Spoiler alert. You probably wouldn't last a week without their tricks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of a Viking settlement. The year somewhere around 850 CE, and winter's grip is tightening. The air smells of pine and salt, with a faint whiff of smoke from distant hearths. Your boots crunch on the frost-dusted ground, and you pull your cloak tighter, already feeling the cold seep through. The Vikings didn't just survive these bone-chilling nights, they thrived, turning harsh winters into a test of grit and ingenuity. Let's start with the basics. You need shelter, warmth, and a plan to outlast the dark months. The sun barely creeps above the horizon now, and soon it'll vanish for weeks, leaving you in a world of long shadows and howling winds. Your first stop is the Longhouse, the heart of Viking survival. Picture a long, low building, its wooden walls weathered by storms, its turf roof blending into the snowy landscape. You duck through the doorway, and the smell hits you earthy, smoky, with a hint of dried fish and damp wool. Inside, it's dim, lit only by a central fire that crackles and pops, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The Longhouse is your fortress against the cold, built to hold heat and keep out the wind. Mainstream history tells us these structures, often 50 to 80 feet long, housed entire families, sometimes up to 30 people, plus livestock in leaner times. The walls, made of timber or wattle and daub, were packed with sod for insulation, a trick that kept the interior bearable, even when blizzards raged outside. But let's get quirky. Some longhouses had a secret weapon-buried stones beneath the fire pit that absorbed heat during the day and radiated it at night, like a Viking version of underfloor heating. Historians still argue whether this was common or a luxury for wealthier clans, but either way, it's a clever hack you're grateful for as you huddle closer to the fire. You notice the smoke curling upward, escaping through a hole in the roof. It's not exactly cozy by modern standards. Your eyes sting, and the air's thick, but it's a lifeline. You're already learning. Survival here means embracing the smoke and the stink. You settle on a bench covered with furs, feeling the weight of the coming months. Winter isn't just cold, it's a marathon. The Vikings planned for it all year, stockpiling food, repairing tools, and strengthening their homes. You glance at the walls, hung with shields and dried herbs, and realize this place is more than shelter, it's a hub of life. The fire's warmth seeps into your bones, but you can't shake the thought. One bad storm, one failed harvest, and this whole setup could falter. Vikings didn't have central heating or grocery delivery, so every choice you make now is about staying one step ahead of the cold. Let's talk about your mindset. You're not just enduring winter, you're outsmarting it. The Vikings saw the cold as a challenge, not a death sentence. You're learning their first rule. Preparation is everything. You've got to think like a Viking now, plan for the worst, but act like you've got it all under control. A little modern aside. It's like prepping for a blackout with a stash of candles and snacks. Except your blackout lasts 4 months, and your snacks are salted cod. Funny thing though, Vikings didn't have coffee to keep them going, so props to you if you're sipping some now. You're going to need that energy to keep up. As you sit by the fire, you hear the wind picking up outside, rattling the wooden shutters. The Longhouse groans, but it holds. You're starting to understand why the Vikings built these things so tough. The cold is your enemy, but this house, this fire, these people around you, they're your army. You're not alone in this, and that's a comfort. The kids are playing near the hearth. Someone's sharpening a knife, and an old woman mutters a story about Thor wrestling a frost giant. It's chaotic, but it's home. You're ready to dive deeper into how this place keeps you alive. Before you drift off, Picture yourself hauling logs to reinforce the walls, your hands red from the cold. It's hard work, but it's satisfying. You're building something that'll stand against the worst winter can throw at you. And honestly, if you can handle this, you're tougher than most. So, let's keep going. There's a lot more to learn about surviving these freezing nights, and I promise it's as soothing as it is weirdly fascinating. You're still in the longhouse. The fires glow, your only light as the wind howls outside, rattling the turf roof. The air's thick with the scent of smoke, damp wool, and something faintly sour, maybe last week's stew. You're getting the hang of this Viking life, or at least you're trying to, but the cold is relentless, seeping through every crack. This longhouse is your sanctuary, and now you're diving deeper into what makes it tick. It's not just a pile of wood and sod. It's a carefully designed cocoon that keeps you and your clan alive through the darkest, coldest nights. Picture yourself walking the length of the longhouse, your boots scuffing on the packed earth floor. It's long and narrow, like a ship turned upside down, with benches lining the walls where people sleep, eat, and argue. The central fire pit runs like a spine down the middle, its embers glowing red. You notice the posts holding up the roof carved with swirling patterns, maybe a nod to Odin or a sea serpent. These aren't just for show. They're sturdy, built to withstand the weight of snow that could crush a lesser structure. Mainstream history confirms longhouses were engineering marvels, often 6 to 8 meters wide and up to 30 meters long, designed to maximize heat retention while housing extended families and their animals. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings kept a house spirit in mind, a little supernatural being they believed lived in the rafters. You might chuckle, but you're half tempted to leave a scrap of bread out for it, just in case. Historians still argue whether these spirits were a serious belief or just a way to scare kids into behaving, but it adds a layer of charm to this smoky, crowded space. You're starting to see the longhouse as more than wall sits, a living, breathing hub of survival. You settle on a bench, pulling a wool blanket over your shoulders. The fire's warmth is uneven. It's toasty near the hearth, but chilly at the edges. You notice how the Vikings arranged their space. Sleeping platforms raised off the cold floor, furs piled high for insulation. You're learning to appreciate the little things, like how the turf roof absorbs sound, muffling the storm outside. It's not exactly soundproof good luck sleeping through a blizzard, but it's better than being out there. A modern aside, imagine trying to explain to a Viking that your house has a thermostat. They'd probably laugh, then offer you a fish. The longhouse isn't just about staying warm, it's about community. You're surrounded by people, your cousin sharpening an axe, a kid tossing bones in a game, an elder weaving a basket. Everyone's got a job, and you're expected to pull your weight. You grab a broom made of twigs and start sweeping ash from the floor, feeling oddly accomplished. The Vikings knew that a tidy longhouse meant less chance of pests or fire hazards. You're starting to respect their obsessive practicality. Every choice is about survival, not comfort. But let's talk about the downsides. The smoke from the fire stings your eyes, and there's no chimney, just that hole in the roof. You cough, wondering how anyone breathes this air all winter. The answer? They didn't always. Respiratory issues were common, though Vikings were too busy surviving to complain. You notice a small vent near the roofline, a clever design to let out smoke without losing too much heat. It's not perfect, but it's better than suffocating. You're starting to get why the Vikings were so tough. Living here is like signing up for a smoke-filled boot camp, a light joke to keep you relaxed. Ever wonder what a Vikings Airbnb review would be? Great fire, cozy furs, but the smoke's a bit much. 3 stars. You smirk, then focus on the task at hand. You're hauling in more firewood, stacking it near the hearth. The wood's damp, hissing as it burns, but it's your lifeline. You're learning the rhythm of the longhouse. Keep the fire going, keep the space functional, keep the people fed. It's a delicate balance, and you're part of it now. You glance at the walls, noticing tools and dried herbs hanging from pegs. There's a loom in the corner, half-finished cloth draped over it. The women are spinning wool, their fingers moving with practiced ease. You're struck by how every inch of this place serves a purpose. Even the kids are useful, fetching water or tending to the smaller animals penned at one end. Speaking of animals, you catch a whiff of goat. Yep, they're here too, tucked in a corner for extra warmth. It's not glamorous, but it's effective. You're starting to feel the Viking mindset. Waste nothing, plan everything. As you sit by the fire, you hear a story being told, a saga about a hero braving a frozen sea. It's not just entertainment, it's a reminder that you're part of something bigger. The longhouse is your world now, and every crack in the wall, every ember in the fire, is a testament to Viking resilience. You're not just surviving, you're learning to live with the cold, to make it your ally. And honestly, if you can handle the smell of goat and smoke, you're doing better than most modern folks would. Before you drift off, imagine curling up on a fur-covered bench, the fire's warmth lulling you. The longhouse creaks, but it holds strong. You're safe here, for now, but there's so much more to learn about keeping the cold at bay. Let's keep going, easing you deeper into this frosty Viking world. You're still nestled in the longhouse, the fire's steady crackle filling the air as you huddle closer to its warmth. The wind outside is a distant howl, but inside, the glow of the flames dances on the wooden walls, casting shadows that flicker like restless spirits. You're learning that the fire isn't just a luxury, it's the beating heart of Viking survival, keeping you from freezing in the brutal Norse winter. Let's dive into how you tend this fire, the lifeline that cooks your food, warms your bones, and keeps the darkness at bay. You crouch by the fire pit, a long, shallow trench lined with stones, its embers glowing like tiny suns. The Vikings didn't mess around with their fires. They kept them burning day and night, a constant battle against the cold. Mainstream history tells us the central fire was the core of every longhouse, fueled by wood, peat, or even dried dung when supplies ran low. You grab a log from the stack you hauled in early, remember that arm workout, and toss it onto the flames. It catches with a satisfying hiss, sending sparks swirling toward the roof's smoke hole. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings believed the fire's smoke carried prayers to the gods, curling up to Valhalla like a spiritual text message. You smirk, wondering if Odin's got a spam filter for all that smoke. Historians still argue whether this belief shaped how fires were tended, or if it was just poetic storytelling, but it makes you look at the rising smoke with a bit more respect. You're not just keeping warm, you're part of a ritual that binds this community to its gods. Tending the fire is no small task. You're learning the art of balance. Too much wood, and the flames choke. Too little, and the cold creeps in. You poke at the embers with a stick, coaxing them to life. The Vikings were pros at this, using seasoned wood to burn hotter and longer. You notice a pile of kindling nearby, carefully split to catch quickly. It's not glamorous work, but there's a rhythm to it, almost meditative. You're starting to get why the Vikings treated fire like a family member. Neglect it, and you're all in trouble. The fire's heat is a blessing, but it's not just for warmth. You glance at the iron pot hanging over the flames, simmering with a stew of barley, fish, and maybe some turnips. Cooking is a constant here, and the fire's your stove. You stir the pot, the smell earthy and comforting, though you're not sure you'd call it gourmet. A modern aside. Imagine explaining a microwave to these folks, they'd probably think it's witchcraft. You chuckle, then focus on the task. The stew's got to last, and you're rationing carefully, knowing winter's only just begun. Let's talk fuel. Wood is your main go-to, but it's not infinite. You're out in the snow every few days, hauling logs from a nearby forest, your breath puffing in clouds. The Vikings planned their wood supply like a military campaign, stockpiling in summer to avoid running dry. You're impressed by their foresight, but also a little jealous of your modern self's gas heater. When wood was scarce, they'd burn peat-dried bog soil that smells like a wet dog but burns slow. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but you're grateful for anything that keeps the fire alive. A light joke to ease you. Ever think a Viking's Tinder profile would just be a picture of a roaring fire? Swipe right for warmth and stew. You grin, then notice the kids nearby, taking turns feeding twigs to the flames. Even they know the fire's importance. It's a group effort. You're starting to see the longhouse as a machine, and the fire's the engine. Everyone's got a role, from chopping wood to banking the embers at night to keep them alive till morning. But it's not all cozy vibes. The fire's a hungry beast, and a stray spark could burn the whole longhouse down. You're careful, watching for embers that might leap to the straw-strewn floor. The Vikings had no fire department, so prevention was everything. You notice a bucket of water nearby, a quiet reminder of the stakes. You're learning to respect the fire's power, warmth, and danger in one flickering package. As you sit by the hearth, the heat seeps into your hands, thawing fingers you didn't realize were numb. The longhouse hums with life, someone's carving a wooden spoon, another's mending a cloak. The fire ties it all together, a constant presence that makes this smoky, crowded space feel like home. You're starting to understand the Viking obsession with fire. It's not just survival. It's hope, light, and a middle finger to the freezing dark. Before you drift off, picture yourself tossing another log on the fire, watching the flames flare up. The warmth wraps around you like a hug, and you're grateful for this simple, ancient technology. The cold's still out there, waiting. But for now, you've got this. Let's keep going, easing deeper into the Viking winter, where every spark counts. You're still in the longhouse, the fire's warmth, a steady comfort as the wind screams outside, clawing at the walls like an angry frost giant. Your breath no longer clouds in front of you, but step a few feet from the hearth, and the cold reminds you it's never far away. Now, you're focusing on what keeps you from turning into a human icicle, your clothing. The Vikings didn't have heated jackets or fuzzy slippers, but they mastered layering like nobody's business. Let's wrap you up in their world of wool, furs, and sheer stubbornness to survive the coldest nights. You stand by the fire, eyeing a pile of clothes on a nearby bench. Your modern self might dream of a puffy coat, but here, it's all about natural fibers. You pull on a woolen tunic. It's weaved tight and slightly scratchy, followed by a thicker wool cloak. Wool was the Vikings' go-to, and mainstream history backs this up. Sheep's wool was abundant in Scandinavia, spun into dense fabrics that trapped heat even when wet. You're amazed at how warm it feels, though you're not winning any fashion awards. The cloak's pinned at your shoulder with a bone brooch, a small nod to style in this frozen world. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings dyed their clothes with plant extracts, like woad for blue or madder for red, because even in winter, a splash of color boosted morale. You're sporting a faded red tunic, and you can't help but feel a little Viking swagger. Historians still argue whether these dyes were purely decorative or had ritual significance, maybe to honor the gods. Either way, you're grateful for the pop of color in this gray, snowy world. It's like wearing a tiny rebellion against the cold. You add another layer, a vest of sheepskin, the fleece turned inward to hug your body with warmth. Over that goes a fur cloak, maybe fox or wolf, whatever the hunters brought back. The weight is heavy, but it's a good heavy, like a blanket you can wear. You're starting to understand the Viking layering system. Start with a light tunic, add a heavier one, then pile on furs until you're a walking cocoon. A modern aside, it's like dressing for a polar vortex, except your Uber isn't coming, and you're stuck in this outfit for months. You chuckle, imagining a Viking trying to zip up a Parker. Good luck with that. Your hands are still cold, so you slip on mittens made of felted wool, stiff but effective. You notice some folks wearing boots lined with grass for extra insulation. It's not exactly Gore-Tex, but it works, trapping air to keep your toes from going numb. You wiggle your feet, grateful for the weirdly genius hack. The Vikings were obsessive about their footwear, knowing frostbite was a real threat. You're learning to check your boots daily, shaking out snow and drying them by the fire you've been tending so carefully. Remember that smoky hearth? Let's talk accessories. You wrap a wool scarf around your neck, tucking it under your cloak. Some Vikings wore hoods or caps, often lined with fur, to protect their heads from the biting wind. You pull on a cap, feeling like a slightly ridiculous but very warm medieval hipster. A light joke to keep you cozy. If Vikings had Instagram, their winter selfies would be all fur cloaks and smug, "I'm not freezing" vibes. You smirk, then adjust your scarf, noticing how every piece of clothing is patched or mended. Nothing goes to waste here. The downside? You're sweating near the fire, but shivering the second you step away. Viking clothing was practical, but it wasn't perfect. You're constantly adjusting, loosening your cloak when you're inside, tightening it when you brave the outdoors. And let's be real, these clothes smell like a mix of wool, sweat, and smoke. Bathing's not a daily thing in winter, so you're just rolling with it. The Vikings didn't care about BO, they cared about staying alive. You notice the women spinning wool by the fire, their hands deftly twisting fibers into thread. It's a reminder that every stitch you're wearing was handmade, often by the people around you. You're struck by the efforts of shearing, spinning, weaving and sewing just to keep you warm. It's humbling, and you're starting to respect the labor behind every layer. Even the kids help, carding wool or stitching patches, making you feel like part of a team effort. As you bundle up, you hear the wind pick up outside, a reminder of why you're dressed like a human blanket. The Vikings' new clothing was their armor against winter's wrath. You're not just wearing wool and furs, you're wearing resilience, ingenuity, and a refusal to let the cold win. Before you drift off, picture yourself pulling your cloak tighter, the fur soft against your cheek. You're warm, you're ready, and you're a little more Viking than you were yesterday. Let's keep going, easing you deeper into this frosty survival saga. You're bundled up in your wool and furs, the longhouse's fire casting a warm glow as you shift on a bench, the smoky air now a familiar comfort. Outside, the Norse winter bites harder, snow piling against the walls, but you're safe for now. Your focus shifts to the next piece of the Viking survival puzzle: food. The coldest nights are bearable only if your belly's full, and the Vikings were masters at stretching their supplies through months of frost. Let's dive into how you manage the food stores, ensuring you don't starve before spring's first thaw. You shuffle to a corner of the longhouse, where wooden barrels and woven baskets line the walls, tucked away from the fire's heat. The air here smells of salt and earth, with a faint tang of fermented fish. You lift a heavy lid, revealing strips of dried cod, stacked like brittle books. This is stockfish, a Viking staple, and mainstream history confirms it was a cornerstone of their diet, preserved by air drying to last through winter. You grab a piece, its texture like leather, and wonder how you'll choke it down. Spoiler, you'll get used to it. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings chewed on dried seaweed as a snack, believing it kept their teeth strong. You try a piece of salty, chewy, and weirdly satisfying, like nature's jerky. Historians still argue whether seaweed was a dietary necessity or just a quirky tradition in coastal settlements. But you're glad for anything that breaks the monotony of fish. You're learning fast. Variety isn't the goal, survival is. You move to another barrel, this one filled with barley, the grains coarse under your fingers. You're helping prepare tonight's meal, a porridge thickened with whatever's on hand, maybe some dried peas or a bit of pork fat. The Vikings were obsessive about preserving food, salting, smoking, or fermenting anything they could. You notice a clay jar of skyr, a thick, yogurt-like dairy product, its sour tang a welcome change. A modern aside, imagine a Viking at a smoothie bar, demanding skyr with a side of seaweed. You'd pay to see that confusion. Cooking is a group effort, and you're roped in, stirring a pot over the fire you've been tending. Remember that smoky hearth? The stew bubbles, its warmth promising a full stomach. But your careful every spoonful is rationed. The Vikings planned their stores meticulously, calculating how much grain, meat and fish would last the winter. You're impressed by their math, though you're pretty sure they didn't use spreadsheets. A light joke. If a Viking ran a grocery store, the sell-by date would just say, "Good luck, it's winter." You check a sack of turnips, some starting to soften but still edible. Preservation wasn't foolproof, rot was a constant threat. You're learning to inspect every root vegetable, tossing the bad ones to the goats, those smelly housemates from earlier. The Vikings also buried food in pits lined with birch bark to keep it cool and pest-free, a trick you're tempted to try if only to avoid the longhouse's damp corners. You're struck by the effort. Every barrel, every jar represents months of planning, from summer harvests to autumn hunts. The downside? Monotony. You're eating the same three things: fish, barley, skyruntle, you dream of pizza. Malnutrition was a risk, especially if a harvest failed or a hunt came up empty. You're starting to respect the Vikings' discipline, eating just enough to keep going without burning through stores too fast. You notice the kids eyeing the stew, their portions smaller than yours. It's a quiet reminder. Everyone sacrifices to make it through. You sit by the fire, chewing a tough strip of stockfish, its saltiness waking your senses. The longhouse hums with activity, someone's grinding barley, another's skimming cream for butter. You're part of this machine now, each task a thread in the web of survival. The Vikings didn't just eat to live, they ate to endure, to outlast the cold that's rattling the walls outside. You're starting to feel their stubborn pride, knowing every bite is a victory against winter's grip. Before you drift off, picture yourself sealing a barrel, the wood creaking under your hands. The fire's warmth lingers, and the smell of stew fills the air, grounding you. You're not just surviving, you're mastering the art of making it through font size, 12px, color, number 333,333. Through. Let's keep going, easing you deeper into this frosty Viking world, where every meal is a small triumph. You're still in the longhouse, the fire's glow a steady anchor as you chew on a tough strip of stockfish, its salty bite a reminder of the food stores you just checked. Outside, the wind howls, snow piling higher, but inside, the air is warm, thick with the scent of smoke and wool. Your attention shifts to the animals huddled in the corner goats, a few chickens, maybe a pig, their soft snuffles blending with the crackle of the fire. These aren't just livestock, they're your allies in surviving the coldest nights, sharing warmth and resources in this cramped, smoky space. Let's dive into how you care for these animals, keeping them and yourself alive through the Norse winter. You shuffle toward the animal pens, a makeshift setup of wooden slats at the far end of the longhouse. The goats bleat softly, their breath visible in the cooler air away from the fire. Mainstream history tells us Vikings often housed livestock indoors during winter, not just for their milk or meat, but for the extra body heat they provided. You feel the warmth radiating from a goat as you brush past, its coarse fur surprisingly comforting. It's like having a living radiator, though one that smells like a wet sweater. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings believed animals could sense spirits in the longhouse, and a restless goat might mean a mischievous ancestor was lurking. You glance at the goats, half expecting them to give you a warning stare, but they're just chewing cud. Historians still argue whether these beliefs influenced how animals were treated, or if it was just superstition to pass the time, but you're starting to see why every bleat feels like part of the longhouse's pulse. You grab a handful of dried hay from a sack part of the summer's harvest, carefully stored like the barley you saw earlier. Remember those barrels? Feeding the animals is a daily chore, and you're learning to ration just like with your own food. The goats munch eagerly, their warmth a quiet trade-off for the hay you're giving up. You're also tasked with mucking out the pens, a job that's as smelly as it sounds. A modern aside, imagine a Viking pitching a pet-friendly longhouse on a reality show, 0 stars for ambience, 5 for survival. The animals aren't just here for warmth. You notice a woman milking a goat, her hands steady despite the cold. The milk will go into skyr or cheese, stretching the food stores you've been managing. Chickens cluck nearby, their eggs a rare treat when their laying winter's not their favorite season either. You're starting to appreciate the delicate balance. Keep the animals fed and healthy, and they'll keep you fed and warm. Neglect them, and you're all in trouble. Let's talk about the downside. The animals make the longhouse smell worse than it already does. Mix their stench with smoke and unwashed wool, and you're living DB0, living like a Viking in a sensory nightmare. You're careful not to step in the muck as you clean the pens, grateful for the fire's heat at your back. A light joke. If Vikings had air fresheners, they'd be millionaires. You smirk, scooping hay into the pens, and wonder how they survived the smell without losing it. You're learning the animals' rhythms, when to milk, when to feed, when to check for sickness. The Vikings were practical, culling weaker animals early to save food for the strong ones. You check a goat's hooves, making sure they're not frostbitten from brief trips outside. It's tedious, but you're part of the system now, and there's a strange satisfaction in it. The longhouse feels alive, with people and animals working together against the cold. The pigs are another story. They're stubborn, rooting through straw for scraps, troppo. You nudge one away from your pile of hay, earning a grunt. They're not pets but food, and you're glad they're penned up. They're notorious for escaping. You're careful though, knowing a loose pig could wreck the longhouse. A second joke. Imagine explaining pig-proofing to a Viking, they'd laugh. Then build a better pen. You grin, picturing it. As you work, you notice the kids tossing bits of straw to the chickens, giggling as they scatter. The animals are a communal lifeline, and everyone's invested. You're starting to feel the weight of it. Every egg, every drop of milk, is a step toward making it through. The fire's warmth, the animals' heat, and the clan's effort all weave together, a a testament to Viking resilience. Before you drift off, picture yourself curling up near the fire, a goat's warmth at your side, the longhouse humming with life. You're not just surviving, you're part of a living, breathing machine that defies the cold. Let's keep going, easing deeper into this Viking winter where every ally counts. You're still in the longhouse, the fire's familiar crackle blending with the soft bleats of the goats you've been tending. The air is heavy with smoke and the faint musk of animals, but you're used to it now, curled up on a fur-covered bench. Outside, the Norse winter rages, the darkness stretching endless hours, swallowing the day. With little to do but wait out the cold, you turn to crafting tools, clothes, stories to fill the long nights. Let's dive into how you keep busy, shaping wood and words to pass the time and strengthen your chances of survival. You sit near the fire, its glow illuminating a half-carved wooden spoon in your hands. The Vikings were master craftsmen, and mainstream history confirms they used winter's downtime to repair tools, weave cloth, and carve intricate designs. You're whittling with a small iron knife, the wood's grain smooth under your fingers. The spoon's not just a utensil, it's a lifeline for stirring the stew you've been rationing. Remember those barrels of barley? Every scrape of the blade feels purposeful, a quiet rebellion against the idle dark. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings carved runes into their tools, believing they held protective magic. You etch a simple line into your spoon, half joking that it'll ward off bad stew. Historians still argue whether these runes were spiritual or just decorative flair, but you like the idea of a charmed spoon. It's a small comfort, like doodling in the margins of a survival manual. You glance around, noticing others at work. A woman spins wool into thread, her spindle twirling like a tiny planet. Another man sharpens an axe, sparks flying as he grinds stone against metal. The longhouse hums with activity, each task a piece of the survival puzzle. You're learning the rhythm craft during the dark months, so you're ready when spring comes. A modern aside, it's like binge, prepping for a camping trip, except your camping trip is a whole season of snow and no Wi-Fi. You chuckle, imagining a Viking scrolling Etsy for hand-carved spoons. Crafting isn't just about tools. You're also weaving stories, a Viking tradition as vital as any axe. You listen, as an elder spins a saga about Thor battling a frost giant, his voice low and rhythmic, lulling the kids nearby. These tales aren't just entertainment, they're glue, binding the clan through the isolation of winter. You try your hand at storytelling, recounting a hunt from last fall, exaggerating just enough to earn a laugh. A light joke. If Vikings had podcasts, they'd all be about giants and bad weather 5 stars for drama. You grin, passing the spoon to a kid who wants to try carving. The downside? Crafting's slow, and mistakes cost time. You nick your finger with the knife, wincing but brushing it off. Vikings didn't have band-aids. The cold makes your hands stiff, and the dim light strains your eyes. You're careful, knowing a broken tool or a bad cut could mean trouble later. The Vikings planned ahead, using every scrap of wood, bone, or wool. You notice a pile of antlers, saved for needles or buttons, and feel a pang of respect for their zero-waste mindset. You shift to another task, helping repair a torn cloak. Your stitches are clumsy, but the woman next to you offers a patient nod. Sewing's not glamorous, but it keeps your layers intact. Remember that fur cloak? You're starting to see crafting as a meditation, each stitch or carve away to stay grounded. The longhouse feels alive, with purposeivery tools sharpened. Every story told builds resilience against the cold outside. As you work, you hear a kid recite a poem, mangling the words but earning cheers. You're struck by how crafting and storytelling intertwine, both shaping the clan's spirit, the fire's warmth, the animals' soft noises, those goats are still chewing, and the hum of activity wrap around you like a blanket. You're not just passing time, you're building a legacy, one spoon, one story at a time. Before you drift off, picture yourself carving by the fire, the wood smooth in your hands, a story unfolding in the background. The longhouse is your world, and every task is a step towards spring. Let's keep going, easing deeper into this Viking winter, where creativity fights the dark. You're still in the longhouse, the fire's steady glow warming your hands as you set down the wooden spoon you've been carving. The air hums with the soft clatter of looms and the murmur of voices, blending with the distant howl of the wind outside. The Norse winter traps you indoors, the darkness pressing against the walls, but you're not alone. The Vikings knew isolation could fray even the toughest spirits, so you turn to the community you're clan gathering to share stories, songs, and laughter to keep the cold at bay. Let's dive into how you bond with others, weaving a social net as vital as the wool cloak you're wearing. You settle on a bench, the fire's warmth a familiar comfort, and join a circle of faces lit by flickering flames. The Vikings were no strangers to communal life, and mainstream history confirms that winter gatherings in the Longhouse were key to survival, strengthening social ties through shared meals and tales. You're passing around a horn of mead-weak, watered-down stuff, but it's warm in your hands. The drink's a rare treat, brewed from honey stored months ago. Remember those carefully rationed barrels? You sip, its sweetness cutting through the smoky air. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings played a game called Nefertafel, a strategy board game with carved pieces, like chess but with more Viking swagger. You try your hand, moving a wooden king across a checkered board, and lose spectacularly to a grinning teenager. Historians still argue whether Nefertafel was just fun or a way to teach battle tactics, but you're just happy to laugh off your defeat. It's a moment of lightness, like finding a good meme in the middle of a blackout. The Longhouse buzzes with stories. An elder recounts a saga about Frasia's golden tears, her voice soft but commanding. You're drawn in, forgetting the cold outside. These gatherings aren't just for kicks. They're a lifeline, keeping spirits high when the sun barely rises. You join in, sharing a tale about a fox you saw last fall, embellishing it with a cheeky twist about it stealing your lunch. A modern aside, imagine a Viking open mic night, half epic poetry, half bad animal impressions. You chuckle, earning a nod from the elder. Laughter's not the only glue. You're helping pass bowls of barley porridge, the same stuff you stirred over the fire. Remember that smoky hearth. Sharing food builds trust, and you notice how everyone gets a portion, even the kids who keep sneaking extra. A light joke. If Vikings had potlucks, they'd probably argue over who brought the best dried fish. You smirk, spooning out porridge, and feel the warmth of being part of something bigger. The downside? Tensions flare in close quarters. You overhear two men bickering over a borrowed axe, their voices sharp, but no one wants a full-blown fight. The Vikings had rules for this, unwritten codes about respect and sharing. You're learning to navigate the unspoken, keep the peace, or the whole Longhouse suffers. You offer to mediate, suggesting they settle it with a round of Nefertafel. It works, and you're quietly proud of your diplomacy. Music creeps in, a woman humming a tune while strumming a bone lyre. You're no musician, but you clap along, the rhythm soothing like a lullaby. The Vikings used music to pass time and honor their gods, and you're starting to feel the pull of their traditions. You notice a kid mimicking your clapping, giggling when you exaggerate your moves. It's a small connection, but it matters severely. Smile is a brick in the wall against winter's loneliness. You're struck by how the Longhouse transforms at night. By day, it's a workshop. Remember that spoon carving? By night, it's a stage for stories, games, and shared survival. The animals in the corner, those goats are still chewing, add their own chorus, grounding you in this living, breathing space. You're not just surviving the cold, you're thriving through connection, each laugh and tale a defiance of the dark. Before you drift off, picture yourself by the fire, a horn of mead in hand, the hum of voices wrapping around you. The Longhouse is your shield, your clan, your strength. Let's keep going, easing deeper into this Viking winter, where every shared moment is a spark against the cold. You're still in the Longhouse, the fire's glow softening the faces around you as the mead horn makes another round, its warmth lingering in your hands. The laughter from the Nefertafel game you played earlier echoes faintly, but now your focus shifts outside, where the Norse winter waits like a patient predator. The snow is deep, the paths treacherous, but Vikings didn't just hunker down, they moved, traveled, and survived in this frozen world. Let's follow you as you navigate the icy landscapes, mastering the art of getting around when the cold wants to pin you in place. You stand at the Longhouse door, pulling your fur cloak tighter. Remember those layers? The air hits like a slap, sharp and biting, as you step into a world of white. Snow blankets the ground, crunching under your boots, and the wind carries flecks of ice that sting your face. Mainstream history tells us Vikings were adept at winter travel, using skis, sledges, and sheer grit to cross frozen terrains for trade or raids. You're not raiding today, thankfully, but you're heading to a nearby settlement to barter for salt, a precious resource for preserving food, like that stockfish you've been chewing. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings used ice skates made from polished animal bones, strapped to their boots for gliding over frozen rivers. You try a pair, wobbling like a newborn foal, and nearly faceplant into a snowdrift. Historians still argue whether bone skates were common or a novelty for the young and reckless, but you're just glad to stay upright. It's a humbling reminder. Moving in winter is a skill, not a given. You're on skis now, crafted from ash wood, their tips curved to glide over snow. You push off, poles in hand, feeling the rhythm of each stride. The Vikings perfected this, using skis not just for travel but for hunting and scouting. You're following a trail marked by notched trees, a faint guide in the endless white. A modern aside. Imagine explaining GPS to a Viking, they'd probably carve runes into their phone for luck. You chuckle, then focus, the cold demanding your attention. The path is uneven, and you're careful to avoid hidden rocks or frozen streams. You're carrying a pack with furs to trade, its weight a constant reminder of the stakes. The Vikings planned their routes carefully, sticking to known paths or frozen rivers when possible. You spot a raven overhead, its call a stark sound in the silence, and you wonder if it's a sign from Odin. Superstition or not, it keeps you moving. The downside? Winter travel is exhausting. Your legs ache, and the cold seeps through your mittens. Frostbite is a real threat, and you check your fingers, rubbing them to keep the blood flowing. The Vikings knew this risk, wrapping their hands and feet in extra wool or grass, like those boots you saw. A light joke. If Vikings had travel blogs, they'd be all top 10 ways to not freeze your toes off. You grin, picturing it, then tighten your scarf. You reach a frozen river, its surface a glassy path. You test it with a pole, ensuring it's thick enough to cross. The Vikings were pros at reading ice, knowing when to trust it and when to skirt around. You're learning, but it's nerve-wracking one wrong step, and you're taking an icy bath. You make it across, your heart pounding, and spot the settlement in the distance, smoke rising from its longhouses. As you trudge on, you're struck by the Vikings' resilience. Travel wasn't just about getting somewhere, it was about staying connected, keeping resources flowing. You're not alone, a cousin skis beside you, sharing the load. The community you bonded with last night, remember that mead, extends out here, a network of trust in a frozen world. You're part of it, each step a testament to Viking stubbornness. Before you drift off, picture yourself gliding on skis, the snow sparkling under a faint moon. The cold is fierce, but you're fiercer, moving through the winter like a true Viking. Let's keep going, easing deeper into this icy saga, where every journey is a victory. You're back in the longhouse, the fire's warmth a welcome relief after your trek through the snowy trails. Remember those wobbly bone skates? Your cheeks are still flushed from the cold, and you're shaking snow off your cloak as you settle near the hearth. The Norse winter doesn't let up, and with food stores dwindling, those barrels of stockfish aren't infinite. You're turning to the wilds to supplement your supplies. Hunting in this frozen landscape is no easy task, but the Vikings were pros at tracking game through snow and ice. Let's follow you into the wilds, where you hunt to keep the clan fed and the coldest nights bearable. You're gearing up, checking a bow and a quiver of arrows tipped with iron. The longhouse hums with quiet preparation. Someone's sharpening a spear, another's packing a sledge with ropes. Mainstream history tells us Vikings hunted deer, boar, and smaller game like hares during winter, using the snow to track footprints that summer's foliage would hide. You sling the bow over your shoulder, feeling its weight, and head out, the crunch of snow under your boots a steady rhythm. The air smells sharp, like pine and frost, and you're already scanning for tracks. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings used trained falcons to spot game, their keen eyes catching movement you'd miss in the snow. You don't have a falcon budget cuts, maybe, but you imagine one perched on your arm, looking smug. Historians still argue whether falconry was widespread or reserved for elite hunters, but you're jealous of anyone with a bird that does half the work. For now, you rely on your eyes, squinting at the snow for signs of life. You spot a set of track share, by the size and crouch to study them. The snow's a canvas, betraying every hop, but it's also a trap, slowing you down as you wade through drifts. You're moving quietly, your breath shallow to avoid scaring the prey. The Vikings were patient hunters, knowing a missed shot could mean a hungry night. A modern aside, imagine a Viking on a hunting app, swiping left on blurry tracks. You chuckle softly, then refocus, arrow notched and ready. The cold is brutal out here, gnawing at your fingers despite the mittens. Those wool layers are working overtime. You're learning to move like a Viking, using the landscape trees for cover, ridges to spot game from above. You spot the hare, its ears twitching, and take aim. The shot's clean, and you trudge over to retrieve it, the small victory warming you more than the fire ever could. A light joke. If Vikings had Yelp, this hare would get 5 stars for easy to catch, tough to chew. You grin, tying the hare to your belt. The downside? Hunting's a gamble. Game is scarce in winter, and you're burning energy just to stay warm. You're careful, checking your surroundings for wolves. Vikings weren't the only hunters out here. You're also rationing your strength, knowing the trek back will be just as grueling. The Vikings often hunted in small groups, and you're not alone. A cousin watches your back, his spear ready. It's a reminder of the community you bonded with. That mead-fueled night feels like ages ago. You drag the sledge, now holding a hare and a small bird, another hunter snagged. The Vikings preserved every bit meat for stew, furs for clothing, bones for tools, like that spoon you carved. You're struck by their efficiency, wasting nothing in this unforgiving season. The trail back is tough, your legs heavy, but the promise of the longhouse's fire keeps you moving. You're learning to read the sky. 2 dark clouds mean a storm's coming, and you don't want to be caught out here. As you near the settlement, the longhouse's smoke rises like a beacon. You're not just bringing food, you're bringing hope, a small win against winter's grip. The clan will eat a little better tonight, and you're part of that. The cold bites, but you're tougher, each step a testament to Viking survival. Before you drift off, picture yourself trudging through snow, the hare's weight a quiet triumph. The longhouse waits, its fire calling you home. Let's keep going, easing deeper into this Viking winter, where every hunt is a fight for survival. You're back in the longhouse, the fire's familiar crackle welcoming you as you shake snow from your boots, the weight of the hare from your hunt. Remember that snowy chase, still tied to your belt. The air smells of smoke and stew, and the clan's quiet chatter feels like a warm embrace after the wilds. The Norse winter presses hard, but you're not just fighting the cold with food and fire, you're leaning on something deeper, spirituality. The Vikings turned to their gods for strength, weaving faith into their survival. Let's dive into how you seek guidance from the Norse pantheon, finding warmth for your soul on the coldest nights. You settle near the fire, its glow casting shadows that dance like spirits on the walls. The Vikings were deeply spiritual, and mainstream history tells us they honored gods like Odin, Thor, and Freya through rituals, offerings, and stories to navigate life's hardships, including winter. You're holding a small wooden carving of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, its weight grounding you. It's not just a trinket, it's a symbol of protection, something you clutch when the wind howls like a frost giant's roar. You're learning that faith here isn't abstract, it's as practical as the bow you carried hunting. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings offered ale to the Disir, guardian spirits of the family, believing they'd bring luck or warn of danger. You pour a splash of mead onto the fire, the flames hissing as the clan nods approvingly. Historians still argue whether these offerings were daily rituals or saved for special occasions, but you feel a tingle of connection, like texting a cosmic hotline. It's a small act, but it steadies you against the winter's weight. You join a group gathered around an elder, her voice low as she recounts how Odin hung on Yggdrasil, the world tree, to gain wisdom. The story's not just entertainment, it's a reminder to endure, to find meaning in struggle. You're struck by how the Vikings wove their gods into every hardship, from failed hunts to endless nights. You try your hand, offering a quiet prayer to Freya for a good spring harvest. your voice barely audible over the fire's crackle. A modern aside. Imagine a Viking at a yoga retreat, chanting to Thor instead of Om. You smirk, but the thought grounds you. The longhouse feels alive with belief. You notice a kid tracing runes on a stick, maybe a charm for health. The Vikings used runes for more than writing. They were magic, a way to tap into the god's power. You're tempted to carve one yourself, but your whittling skills, that spoon was a struggle, need work. A light joke. If Vikings had motivational posters, they'd say, "Keep calm and trust Odin." You grin, passing the Mjolnir carving to a neighbor who looks anxious about the storm outside. The downside? Faith doesn't fill empty bellies. You're still rationing that stockfish. Those barrels are getting low. And no amount of prayers guarantees a successful hunt. The Vikings knew this, balancing spirituality with pragmatism. You're learning to do the same, finding comfort in rituals, but keeping one eye on the food stores. You notice a woman tying a sprig of evergreen to a beam, a nod to Yule, the midwinter festival. It's a spark of hope, a reminder that the sun will return. You're part of the ritual now, helping set out small offerings, bits of bread, a bone from the hare you caught. The clan's quiet, respectful, but there's no pomp, just a shared understanding that you're all in this together, gods included. The fire's warmth, that hearth you've been tending, and the animals' soft noises, those goats are still here, blend with the elder's voice, creating a cocoon of belief. You're not just surviving, you're finding meaning, a way to face the cold with courage. Before you drift off, picture yourself by the fire, clutching the Mjolnir carving, the elder's story lulling you. The gods feel close, their strength a quiet hum in your chest. Let's keep going, easing deeper into this Viking winter, where faith warms the soul as much as the fire warms the body. You're still in the longhouse, the fire's glow softening the edges of the Mjolnir carving you're holding, its weight a quiet comfort after your moment of prayer. Remember that splash of mead for the Desir? The air is thick with smoke, and the faint warmth of the goats in the corner. But outside, the Norse winter is unleashing its full fury. Blizzards howl, snow buries paths, and the cold tests every skill you've learned. Let's dive into the harsh realities of winter's peak, where you face storms, starvation risks, and the raw challenge of staying alive when nature seems determined to win. You stand by the door, peering through a crack as snow pelts the walls like 1,000 tiny fists. The wind scream is relentless, and you're glad for the longhouse's sturdy frame. Remember those sod walls? Mainstream history tells us Viking winters could be brutal, with temperatures dropping well below freezing and storms isolating settlements for weeks. You're checking the door's leather hinges, ensuring no drafts sneak in. The cold is a thief, stealing heat from the fire you've tended so carefully, and you're not about to let it win. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings believed blizzards were stirred by Skadi, the goddess of winter, skiing across the mountains with her icy breath. You picture her out there, a divine snowboarder, and half wish you could bribe her with mead. Historians still argue whether these myths were coping mechanisms or genuine fears, but you're starting to understand why every storm feels personal. You're not just fighting weather, you're battling a force with a name. The fire's your lifeline, but it's hungry. You're hauling in the last of the wood, those logs you stacked ages ago, each trip outside a battle against the wind. Your face stings, and your fingers ache despite the mittens. Those wool layers are barely enough. The Vikings knew starvation was a bigger threat than cold without food. Warmth means nothing. You check the stores, those barrels of stockfish are dangerously low, rationing even tighter now. A modern aside, imagine a Viking on a meal. Prep app, logging fish scraps, day 47. You chuckle, but the empty barrels sober you up fast. The downside hits hard. Some winters, the stores ran out. You're feeling it now, skipping meals to stretch what's left. The kids are quieter, their portions smaller, and you're sharing your stew with a neighbor who looks gaunt. The Vikings faced this grim reality, sometimes culling animals early. Those goats aren't just cuddly heaters, to save grain. You're learning to make tough calls, like saving the last bit of skyer for the weakest in the clan. A light joke, if Vikings had survival shows, they'd call it, "Who can eat less fish?" You smirk, stirring the pot, but the hunger's real. A blizzard's trapped you inside, the snow too deep for hunting. Forget that hare you snagged. You're stuck, The longhouse, a smoky cocoon. You're helping patch a leak in the roof, snow seeping through like a bad guest. The Vikings were relentless, repairing and reinforcing even in the worst storms. You're impressed by their grit, but also exhausted. Every task feels heavier when your stomach's growling. You notice a kid wrapping a scarf tighter, mimicking your layers, and you share a nod. Community, that mead-fueled night feels distant, is what keeps you going. You're also keeping spirits up, recounting a story about Thor smashing ice giants, your voice steady despite the storm's roar. It's not just distraction, it's defiance. A way to remind everyone the gods are watching, that Mjolnir carving still in your pocket. The longhouse creaks, but it holds. Its walls a testament to the preparation you've been part of. You're not just surviving, you're enduring, each day a middle finger to the blizzard outside. Before you drift off, picture yourself by the fire. The storm's howl muffled, your hands busy mending a cloak. The cold is fierce, but you're fiercer, holding on with every trick you've learned. Let's keep going, easing deeper into this Viking winter, where survival is a gritty, stubborn fight. You're still hunkered down in the longhouse, the fire's embers glowing as the blizzard's roar outside begins to soften, though snow still presses against the walls. The harsh realities of winter's peak, that storm you just weathered, have left the clan weary, but you're not cut off entirely. The Vikings knew survival meant staying connected, even in the deep freeze, so you're turning to trade bartering goods to keep hope and resources alive. Let's follow you as you prepare to trade, weaving ties with other settlements to bolster your chances against the coldest nights. You're sorting through a pile of furs near the fire, their soft weight a reminder of the hare you hunted. Those wilds feel like a lifetime ago. The air smells of smoke and damp wool, but there's a buzz of purpose as you pack a sledge for a trading trip. Mainstream history tells us Vikings were skilled traders, even in winter, bartering furs, tools, and dried fish for essentials like salt or iron across frozen trails. You're choosing your best pelts fox and rabbit knowing they'll fetch a good price for grain or wax to keep your candles burning. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings used amber beads as currency, believing they held the sun's warmth to trade for luck as much as goods. You finger a small amber bead, its glow catching the firelight, and wonder if it's worth a sack of barley. Historians still argue whether amber was purely economic or carried spiritual weight, but you're tucking it in your pouch, just in case. It's a tiny spark of optimism in this grey, snowy world. You're bundling up, pulling on that fur cloak, those layers are your armor, and checking your skis. Remember that icy river crossing? The journey's short but risky, a half-day's trek to a neighboring settlement. You're not alone, a cousin joins you, his sledge loaded with bone tools. The Vikings planned trades carefully, timing them between storms to avoid getting snowed in. A modern aside, imagine a Viking on eBay, listing slightly used fox pelt, great for freezing nights. You chuckle, adjusting your pack, the cold already nipping at your nose. The trail is quiet, the snow muffling your steps as you glide over drifts. You're following a path marked by stone cairns, half buried but visible. The Vikings relied on these networks, trading not just goods but news, keeping clans connected. You reach the settlement, its longhouse smoke a welcome sight. You're bartering now, offering furs for salt, crucial for preserving what's left of your food stores. Those stockfish barrels are haunting you. The deal's tense but fair, and you score a small sack of barley too. The downside? Trade's a gamble. The trail's dangerous, and a bad deal could leave you short. You're careful, watching the trader's eyes for tricks. The Vikings had a code honesty in trade, kept alliances strong, but greed could sour things. You're learning to haggle, offering the amber bead for a candle's worth of wax. A light joke. If Vikings had Yelp reviews, this trader would get 4 stars for decent salt, sketchy vibes. You smirk, securing the goods, and start the trek back. Back in the longhouse, you unpack, the clan gathering to see the haul. The salt's a win, ensuring your fish lasts longer, and the barley means more porridge for the kids. You're struck by how trade isn't just about stuff, it's about hope, a lifeline to the outside world. The fire's warmth, that hearth you've tended, and the goat's soft bleats, those smelly allies, ground you as you share the news. The community, that Nefertafel, night feels warmer now, thrives on these connections. Before you drift off, Picture yourself by the fire, the new sack of barley at your feet, the amber bead still in your pouch. The cold's still out there, but trade's brought you closer to spring. Let's keep going, easing deeper into this Viking winter, where every deal is a step towards survival. You're back in the longhouse, the fire's steady glow warming your hands as you stow the salt and barley from your trading trip. Remember that tense barter for wax? The blizzard's howl has faded, and through the cracks in the door, you glimpse a faint shift in the lightless grey, almost hopeful. The Norse winter is loosening its grip, and you're starting to spot signs of spring's promise, like a distant friend waving from across the fjord. Let's follow you as you prepare for the thaw, balancing cautious optimism with the Viking grit that's carried you this far. You step outside, your boots crunching on snow that's turning slushy under a weak sun. The air still bites, but it's softer, carrying a faint scent of wet earth beneath the frost. Mainstream history tells us Vikings were attuned to seasonal shifts, using subtle cues like melting ice or bird migrations to plan for spring planting and travel. You're scanning the horizon, noticing icicles dripping from the longhouse roof. It's not warm yet, don't ditch that fur cloak, but the days are stretching, giving you a few extra hours of light to work with. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings marked the thaw by offering a small feast to Frey, the god of fertility, believing it ensured a good harvest. You're helping set out a modest spreadsome of that precious barley porridge and a bit of skyer. Those food stores are still tight. Historians still argue whether these feasts were practical celebrations or sacred rituals, but you're just happy for an excuse to eat a little extra. The clan's mood lifts, like kids hearing the ice cream truck after a long winter. You're busy now repairing tools for spring. You grab the axe you sharpened weeks ago, remember that crafting session, checking its edge for planting or building. The Vikings used this time to prep fields and boats, knowing the thaw meant action. A modern aside, imagine a Viking with a to-do list app, ticking off, sharpen plow, thank Freyr, don't freeze. You chuckle, honing the axe, the fire's warmth at your back. That hearth's still your lifeline. The downside? The thaw's tricky. Melting snow turns paths to mud, making travel harder than when you skied to trade. Those cairns are half sunk now. You're wading through slush, checking the livestock. Those goats are itching to graze. The Vikings knew a false thaw could trap you freeze again, and you're stuck. You're learning to watch the sky, noting clouds that hint at lingering cold. A light joke, if Vikings had weather apps, they'd still trust a raven's flight over a forecast. You grin, spotting a bird circling, maybe a sign of warmer days. You're also repairing the longhouse, patching leaks from the melting snow. The roof sod is heavy, sagging in places, and you're hauling fresh turf to reinforce it. It's hard work, but it feels good, like shaking off winter's weight. You notice the kids playing outside, tossing stones in a game, their laughter a sound you haven't heard in weeks. The clan's buzzing, planning for planting and fishing, and you're part of it, your hands busy and your heart lighter. The promise of spring isn't just practical, it's emotional. You're carving a small rune for luck, a nod to the rituals you've learned, that Mjolnir carving's still in your pocket. The Vikings saw the thaw as a gift from the gods, a reward for enduring. You're starting to feel it too, each drip of ice a whisper of hope. The community, those Hainefataful nights seem brighter now, pulls together, sharing plans for the season ahead. Before you drift off, picture yourself standing outside, the sun's faint warmth on your face, a rune in your hand. The longhouse stands strong behind you, a testament to your survival. Let's keep going, easing deeper into this Viking winter's end, where every sign of spring is a quiet victory. You're standing outside the longhouse, the faint warmth of a rising sun brushing your face as the slushy snow crunches under your boots. A far cry from the icy trails you skied months ago. Remember those wobbly bone skates? The air carries a hint of thawing earth, and the promise of spring you glimpsed earlier is starting to feel real. The Norse winter's grip is loosening, and you're reflecting on the Viking resilience that carried you through the coldest nights. Let's linger here, marveling at how you and the clan defied the freeze, weaving together every skill, story, and spark of hope to make it to this moment. You walk the settlement, noticing the longhouse's weathered walls, still standing strong despite the blizzards you endured. Those storms were no joke. The Vikings were masters of survival, and mainstream history confirms their ability to thrive in Scandinavia's brutal winters through preparation, community, and sheer stubbornness. You're running your hand along the sod roof, patched with care during the thaw, and feel a swell of pride. This wasn't just about staying warm, it was about outsmarting a season that could have crushed you. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Vikings celebrated the first green shoots of spring with a dance, believing it woke the earth from its slumber. You're tempted to try a clumsy jig, but settle for kicking a clump of snow instead, laughing as it scatters. Historians still argue whether these dances were ritual or just an excuse to shake off cabin fever, but you're grinning at the thought of twirling in the mud. It's a light moment, a nod to the joy of surviving. You're back inside now, the fire's embers low but steady, a reminder of the hearth you tended all winter. That smoky lifeline never quit. The clans gathered, sharing a modest meal of barley porridge and the last of the skyer, those food stores held out, barely. You're struck by how every choice rationing food, trading furs, praying to Freyrover's safety net. A modern aside, if Vikings had motivational speeches, they'd be all, teamwork makes the dream work, also don't eat all the fish. You chuckle passing a bowl, feeling the clan's bond. The longhouse is quieter now, the kids playing with carved sticks, like that spoon you whittled. The goats bleating softly. Those smelly allies earned their keep. You're reflecting on the stories that kept spirits high, from Thor's battles to your own exaggerated tale of that hare hunt. Each saga, each laugh, was a brick in the wall against despair. A light joke. If Vikings had Oscars, they'd give one for best story to not go crazy in winter. You smile, tucking the Mjolnir carving into your pouch, its weight a final nod to the gods who watched over you. The downside? Survival wasn't glamorous. You're still smelling of smoke and goat, your hands calloused from crafting and hauling. But those hardships forged something unbreakable resilience. You're marveling at how the Vikings turned a frozen wasteland into a home, using fire, furs, and faith. You're part of that now, your own grit tested and proven. The longhouse, the clan, the endless nights, they're all part of you, a story you'll carry like a rune. As the fire dims, you feel the weight of winter lifting, replaced by a quiet hope. The fields will soon need ploughing, the boats repairing, but for now, you're content, the warmth of survival wrapping around you like a cloak. You're lying on a fur-covered bench, the longhouse soft and still, the fire's last embers casting a gentle glow. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of wood smoke and wool, and the distant drip of melting snow lulls you like a slow heartbeat. You've made it through the coldest nights, through blizzards and hunger, with the clan's laughter and the gods' quiet presence to guide you. The Mjolnir carving rests in your hand, its edges smooth from your touch, a reminder of the strength you've found. Outside, the world is waking, blades of grass pushing through the frost, promising fields of green and seas to sail. You're safe, you're strong, and the longhouse holds you like a cradle. Let the winter fade, let the stories linger, and let your breath slow as you drift, warm and weightless, into dreams of spring.